Now, I know that Game Week 3 isn't over yet, and it is, to be fair, an international break coming up, but I thought you might appreciate some FPL content nonetheless. There's already plenty to talk about. So, in this video, I'm going to talk through players to buy and avoid ahead of Game Week 4. There's a couple of players that I just immediately have to talk about. One of them being Brian Mbeumo. I tweeted actually earlier on in the week that if anyone's struggling for a Solanke replacement, I think the best replacement for someone like Solanke, I know they're not like for like in position, but getting Brian Mbeumo in was the best way to go in my mind. With Tony leaving now, he's gone to a Saudi Arabian team, and Mbeumo becomes just Brentford's absolute talisman and by far and away their best player, right? He's on penalties, free kicks, plays 90 minutes each game. All of those attributes in my mind just tick all the boxes of a good FPL asset. And that's what Brian Mbeumo is, right, without Tony in the team. And also, you're looking at Game Week 4 and they've got Man City away. Yes, on the face of it, that's a tough fixture. But historically, Brentford have a really good record against the big teams and Man City. And the numbers that he's been putting up last season, this season, look really good. You know, if you were desperate to bring him in, obviously, I can't say the Man City away fixture is good, right? But what I'm saying is don't let it completely put you off the thought of buying him. Maybe hold on for one more week because Tottenham away is certainly a little bit more appealing. But, you know, if you want to get him in, I certainly wouldn't rule him out being able to do something against Man City either. He's just, yeah, a great FPL option that just ticks all the boxes. I think it's unfair to talk about Brian Mbeumo without also mentioning Wissa. 6.1 million. I genuinely think he's one of the best value forwards in the game. And when you compare him to João Pedro, who's another popular cheap striker, well, forward in the FPL game, I just think João Pedro is going to be a minutes risk this season, right? No doubt in my mind is that going to be the case. They've got so many options up front to Brighton, whereas Wissa, you've got to think Wissa plays every game that he's fit for Brentford in my mind. And actually, from open play, because obviously Mbeumo's got the penalties and free kicks to kind of back him up, Wissa's actually better statistically. I didn't talk about this when going through Mbeumo, but obviously applies to both players. Brentford's fixture run from Game Week 6 onwards is amazing, and you can see it there on your screen. So Mbeumo and Wissa, even as a double up, two really good players in my mind going forwards. Another really good cheap player is Antoine Semenyo of Bournemouth. I would suggest, you know, given that Solanke has now gone, Semenyo has become Bournemouth's most dangerous player now, and the comeback they made against Everton, by the way, was absolutely insane. I don't know whether it was more Bournemouth being good or Everton just capitulating, but yeah, I mean, fantastic comeback for them. Obviously, Semenyo scored the opening goal there for Bournemouth. I would ask the question, he probably won't be 5.5 for very much longer, but is he the best 5.5 million midfielder in the game right now? I definitely think there's a bit of a collection now of good assets at this kind of price point. And I'd also ask, right, during pre-season, Justin Kluivert took a penalty for Bournemouth, right? I don't know. I just got a feeling with Solanke gone, Semenyo could become that Bournemouth penalty taker. I guess it's a long shot. We don't know until they get one. But one thing he does have is great underlying data. The expected returns per 90 data, which is one of the stats I really like to look at when picking an FPL asset. 0.82. That is really, really good. It's on a level with, well, the likes of Isak, Salah, etc. were putting up last season. I know it's only been 3 games, so that's a little bit blown out of proportion. I've got the fixtures wrong there. But I do think Semenyo is going to be a really good asset going forwards. So, similar to what I've done in my previous videos, I've spoken about teams that I really think are worth targeting. First up, we've got Man City. Now, from a defensive perspective, I'd say they've got a couple of challenging games there in their next 5 fixtures. But from an attacking perspective, I think they look really good. In 4 of the next 5 games, the 11-5 projection model has them scoring over 2 goals. And against Arsenal at the Etihad, the fact that they're at home, I think they'll score some goals in that one as well. So I do think Man City are definitely a team worth targeting. And if you were targeting Man City, you know, we kind of already know who the best Man City players are, right? I don't need to go into too much detail. But if you were looking to buy a Man City player you don't currently own, I quite like the look of Phil. I know, I can hear the questions already before I've interrupted myself, right? I know he's missed the last 2 game weeks with illness, but think about it. He's now got, I don't believe he's in the England squad. He's now got 2 weeks off to fully recover from, you know, whatever illness he had, to be fit and ready to go in game week 4. And if, he's got those 2 weeks to recover, train up, he's not playing it in, for England, etc. I think it's a really good opportunity for him to get to match fitness and Pep Guardiola to hopefully pick him in the starting 11. His ownership, particularly amongst engaged managers, because he hasn't been playing, is going to be low. He's now down to 9.4 million. For those numbers he put up last season, I think he could be great value. And providing he's fit, I said should be back for Game Week 3. I think he should be back for Game Week 4. Providing he is fit and ready to go, which, to be fair, we will likely hear from Pep in his press conferences. Pep Guardiola is usually pretty open and honest about the fitness of his players. That's definitely one thing you can credit him with. So we will know the situation with Phil Foden before the deadline. And if he is confirmed fit, I think he's a great option. Rico Lewis has definitely been getting some attention from FPL players, and rightly so. He's currently the first choice Man City right back. 4.6 million, gone up a little bit in price. However, I do think the ship has almost sailed with him now. I definitely think, if you were looking to replace Quanta, for example, earlier on in the season, Lewis was probably the best replacement to do that, because you could pretty much, as long as he played to a reasonable level, guarantee he was going to start the next couple of games, which is, in reality, all you probably wanted and needed him for. I say he's the best 4.5. It's gone up a little bit, but he's the best sub 5 million defender in the game, in my opinion, when he plays right. And one observation I've made is, when watching Man City, Guardiola, you would originally consider to be that attacking inverted fullback that Pep likes to use. But when Lewis and Guardiola are playing together, it's Lewis that plays that role, which obviously makes him more attacking and a more attractive FPL option. But into the cons, he is away with England on international duty, and Kyle Walker has not been called up. Walker has 2 weeks off now. Does that mean Lewis could start in game week? Sorry, does that mean Kyle Walker could start in game week 4 because Lewis is off playing for England? Potentially getting tired, potentially picking up knocks, etc. And Walker just has 2 weeks off, training with Pep at Man City. I think Lewis could lose his place in the team coming up. That's just my opinion, but yeah, just something to watch out for. Next up, I wanted to talk about Arsenal. I think, again, they obviously play Man City. We just spoke about Man City playing Arsenal, right? But I still think defensively they can be relied upon. And also, the Tottenham game, they probably do concede in. But I wouldn't completely rule out that Man City-Arsenal game being a 0-0. That has been a common scoreline when those teams meet. And then they got Leicester, Southampton, Bournemouth after that. 3 games where they could conceivably keep 3 clean sheets, right? And the predicted goals are looking really strong. Again, they've got that Man City fixture in, which kind of messes things up a little bit. But in a majority of the games, they're expected to score in and around 2 goals. And against Leicester and Southampton, 2 promoted teams back-to-back, by the way, match day 6 and 7, they're predicted to score basically 3 goals. So you round it up, it's 3 goals. So Arsenal are definitely looking like a good team to target in my mind. I thought I'd do a little, I guess you call this a tier list of players that I think are probably worth picking from Arsenal. And I reckon there are 6. Saka, Ben White, Gabriel, Saliba, Raya and Havertz are my favourite Arsenal assets. And genuinely, you could pick any one of these, and I think you'll be fine. You could pick 3 of them if you want to triple up, right? But I do think those are the best Arsenal picks. Outside of that, genuinely, I only think Odegaard is the other one I'd consider to be a decent pick, but he doesn't quite look as prolific as he has been in seasons gone by for pure attacking returns. His role in that Arsenal team is obvious, right? He's a great player for them. But in terms of those final passes and touches to score a goal, he isn't necessarily quite as good, I would say, as he has been, maybe previous seasons or last season. So I called him a decent pick. Honestly, though, outside of that, I'd probably just avoid all the other Arsenal players. The deeper line midfielders, probably wouldn't go for them. Left back, you don't know who's going to play week on week. And left wing is the same, a sort of hash up between Martinelli and Trossard. You can't really 100% rely on someone to start in that position. So for me, that's the 6 I would definitely be looking to buy, consider great picks. Odegaard, definitely a decent pick, and I'd probably avoid all the others, but you got 7 players there I think you could select. The next team I was interested in was Aston Villa as well. Got Everton up next, Wolves, Ipswich, Man United and Fulham. I would suggest that's 5 decent fixtures. Not necessarily all of them from maybe a defensive perspective. Man United could put a goal past them. But from an attacking perspective, Man United have not been really that good so far this season, and the rest of those teams have been conceding a fair few goals so far. And the projected goals for Villa kind of prove that. In most of the games, they are predicted to score 2 goals, couple of goals, right? Which I think suggests they're going to be pretty good over the next few. So thought again, I put together a little tier list of who I think are the best Aston Villa assets. I reckon there are 4 that are probably the most pickable. Ollie Watkins, of course, I'll talk about him in a second. Morgan Rogers, we all know how good, 5 million, well, 5.1 now, but probably going to prove to be one of the best value assets in the game this season. One thing I would say, though, he's obviously a great player, proving his worth in that team, but he's not necessarily, similar to Odegaard, getting that final ball or touch to put the ball in the net. So, might not be, he's good on the eye, but not necessarily good for FPL points so far. Just one thing to think about. Konsa is probably the defender that will play the most minutes in my mind. And then Emiliano Martinez in goal, I think, could do really well. Just going back to those clean sheet odds, they look pretty good for at least 4 of those next 5 game weeks. And I think Martinez will be really good for saves bonus as well. I did have Bailey in as a decent pick, but it does look like he did his hamstring in that game in Game Week 3. So one thing to monitor, I guess. At least he's got a couple of weeks to potentially recover from that one. But hamstrings, I don't think necessarily recover in a couple of weeks. So one thing to bear in mind. Luca Dean and Pau Torres. I can only really call them decent picks because I think they're relatively injury prone. And Luca Dean is the biggest troll in FPL history. And I believe we're still waiting for Villa to have a penalty in the Premier League. And in the back of my mind, John McGinn is going to be the one that takes them because he takes them for the Scotland national team. Now, I'm not 100% certain that is the case. But remembering back to Douglas Luiz of last season, who had a very good season in terms of goals, largely propped up by penalties. Villa are going to play in a similar fashion to the way they did last year, right? So whoever that Villa penalty taker is going to score, 6 or 7 penalties this season, I would expect. So, yeah, just one thing to bear in mind. Outside of that lot, though, I'd probably avoid all the other Villa players. But again, this is just my opinion, these little tier lists, right? So if you disagree, think there should be any other players for any other teams that I've spoken about, please put it in the comments. I really still like Ollie Watkins. He's played 3 games and hasn't yet scored a goal. I'll admit, that doesn't look good on the face of it. But he is a proven Premier League goal scorer now over multiple seasons. And he's got such a good set of opening fixtures. Everton, Wolves and Ipswich. Defensively, at least, I would suggest are 3 of the weaker teams in the league. I mean, the guy could have a field day, and Villa could have a field day in those games. He's relatively high in ownership in the total game. I think he's around 29% owned at the moment. But I would say amongst engaged managers right now, his ownership is relatively low. And I know it's only 3 games. I mentioned that we're going through Semenyo, whose underlying numbers looked really good per 90. But the underlying numbers he's putting up this season are actually better than what he did last year. So, just one thing to bear in mind. You might think he's off to a poor start, but the numbers he's putting up this year, underlying wise, expected returns per 90, are better than what he did last season. And he should have scored a goal. I mean, he's got 1.4 XG and hasn't scored yet. So his goal is coming. I think he's due. And provided he gets through the international break unscathed, I think he's going to be a really good option for game week 4, 5 and 6, looking at those fixtures. I also, in general, think Liverpool are going to be a really good team to pick from as well. They kept a couple of clean sheets in their opening couple of fixtures. Defensive-wise, their next few fixtures are really good. Forest, Bournemouth, Wolves, Crystal Palace, even Chelsea at home. You would not be surprised if Liverpool could keep a clean sheet and not necessarily keep 5 out of 5, but, individually, you would not be surprised to see them pick up a clean sheet against any of those teams, in my mind. And the goals they were predicted to score according to 11FI, I think they're the number 1 ranked team for the next 5 game weeks for projected goals, right? 2.57 against Forest, 2.61 against Bournemouth, 2.23 against Wolves, 1.92 against Crystal Palace, 2.43 against Chelsea. So they're expected to be prolific in front of goal. However, I would say there's a smaller, pool of Liverpool players I would actually want to pick in my team. I would say Robertson and Trent from defence are definitely pickable. I would actually right now say Robertson looks like a better asset than Trent. Last season, Robertson put up better underlying numbers than Trent did, and he's 1 million cheaper in the game. So one thing to bear in mind there. I would say Salah, obviously. No question that Salah's a good option. I really like Diogo Jota. With the signing of Chiesa and Darwin Núñez and Gakpo, who can play on the left, I would probably say that makes Luis Diaz probably a little bit less nailed, who isn't necessarily the most prolific, but he's usually there every game and playing. And then Jota, I do like Jota. I think he's great, but I do worry about his injury record. I think it is genuinely only a matter of time before Jota picks up some kind of injury. That's just kind of the nature kind of player that he is. But he is good, and he's going to score goals when he's in the team. So yeah, Liverpool, over the next 5 game weeks, look like another team to be picking players from. I thought it'd be good just to end the video by going through the all-up numbers in the model that I just showed, the 11 of 5 projected goals and clean sheet odds. I'm not going to go through every team in detail, but what I hope this does is just give you an idea of the teams that are, well, it's quite simple really. The teams that are expected to score the most goals, and then you can cherry pick your favourite players from those teams, and that would suggest to me those are good players to be buying. And likewise, those to keep clean sheets, right? You'd be picking defenders from teams that are likely to, well, be looking at teams that are likely to keep clean sheets in the next, well, 5 fixtures, and then cherry pick your players from them. So, you know, projected goals, I've spoken through the top teams basically. Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, Villa, Chelsea, Spurs are the top 6. In terms of clean sheets, Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, Villa, Everton, not so sure about that, Chelsea and Crystal Palace. So yeah, that gives you a view basically of the teams that are expected to be the most prolific in terms of goals and the most frugal, I think would be the correct word to use there, in terms of defence. So you know, you can pause this at any time if you want and just have a look in a bit more detail. So yeah, some players to buy, potentially think about avoiding, and then also some projection models for you there as well. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, I'm not conscious that we're just about to go into an international break, right? So anything could happen with all of the players that I've spoken about there. I know the risk I'm taking with this video, but I know people like FPL content. So I wanted to get something out for you on a Saturday evening. If you did enjoy it, found it useful, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating. You know, if you disagree with any of the players, you know, any of the rankings or players that I've spoken about here, feel free to let me know in the comments. I have no issue if people disagree with me. I mean, that's what FPL is all about at the end of the day. You know, people with different opinions. All I ask is that you just be a bit polite about it in the comments. I think that's everything. If you want to see more content from me, I'll be making some FPL videos throughout the international break. You can subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel, which should be just there on your screen, back there. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.